will just be a short presentation about the People's Liberation Army Navy, tautology there, aircraft carriers. In other words, the main Chinese Navy, as opposed to the Taiwanese Navy. Sometime next year, I'll give a talk on some of the other vessels in the Navy, but today we'll just focus on aircraft carriers. There's a long story here. Back in the days where the Russian Empire was falling apart, or rather the USSR was falling apart and becoming Russia, Russia was left with some aircraft carriers that it didn't really need. Light carrier Kiev served in Russian service 1975 to 1993, but it was rusting away in the mid-90s, and it was brought as scrap by a Chinese businessman as an entertainment venue and taken across to China. And there it became a wedding venue and a holiday destination fairly close to Beijing. You could see Russian dance and singing shows on board. You could see light shows. You could have your wedding and your honeymoon in the captain's cabin, which has been slightly modified by the look of the picture on the right-hand side there. Maybe a little bit tacky. And you can do that all in the close proximity of the missile systems and aircraft that were on the carrier at the time it was sold to this Chinese businessman. So that was a very successful venue. Another Chinese businessman then bought another light carrier from Russia, the Minsk. This was bought in 1995. Again, it was turned into an entertainment venue, not quite as successful as the Kiev one, but still a sort of going concern until fairly recently when it caught fire. So China was building up this reputation of buying scrap aircraft carriers and turning them into theme parks. Then they bought a scrap version of the Admiral Kuznetsov. And they bought it as an entertainment venue, but decided to turn it into a working aircraft carrier, which became the aircraft carrier Liaoning, the Chinese PLA Navy's first carrier, type 001. And in 2012, it started operating. So it's got the lines that you would expect from an Admiral Kuznetsov class carrier. The hull was refurbished. Some of the elements were removed because the Chinese didn't want to use them. Kit was kitted out with fairly well-established, though fairly antiquated Chinese systems. And the carrier was used as an operational test bed so that the PLA Navy could learn how to operate a carrier with fixed and rotary wing aircraft at sea, using all the sort of skills that you would expect to try to learn and develop in operating an aircraft carrier. They then also, in their own shipyards, produced what you basically call a Chinese copy of the Liaoning. And they called it Shandong. This was Chinese from the bottom up, but the same shape and same style as the Liaoning. It's fitted out with slightly more modern Chinese systems, analogous to the most modern destroyers that are also coming off the slipways at the moment. And this provided a better version of the aircraft carrier with all new components and allowed them to operate a second one at sea. There were some changes in the island structure and some of the radars and electronic equipment used, but basically it was a complete copy of the Russian design. And there are some models available. You can buy from trumpeter models of Carrier 001 and Carrier 002. And if you put the two of them together, they look very, very similar, apart from the minor differences on the island. If you're looking close up, these are 1/700th scale models, so a little bit smaller than Ralph's 1/100th. Some of the details are quite nice. I added some aftermarket Chinese Navy aircraft carrier personnel as well, which I got from Edward. They're photo etch flats, but they provide a nice little bit of extra entertainment on the deck there. So you do need a magnifying glass or a microscope to actually pick them out. And then we come to 2024, last year, where China had a breakout capability, their own fully indigenous Chinese flat top carrier rather than one with a ski ramp at the front. This is Fujian, their CV-18. This flat top carrier, it's got very advanced systems. The two main catapults are electromagnetic, which is the same sort of technology used in the modern Gerald Ford class carrier that is coming out of the United States at the moment. And that replaces the old steam catapult and gives more flexibility as long as you can make that technology work. And the Chinese seem to be managing to do that quite well. It's got a mixed air wing of crewed and uncrewed aircraft. And she was undertaking sea trials all the way through 2025. And just last month, In fact, the beginning of this month, she was fully commissioned into the Chinese Navy, and President Xi was there at the ceremony touting the wonders of Chinese shipbuilding and Chinese power projection. As I say, similar size to Gerald Ford, which is somewhat lighter than Gerald Ford. I think she's about 70,000 tons rather than the sort of 90 to 100,000 that you get with Gerald Ford, but it's still a very large carrier. And at the moment, somewhere in the Chinese shipyards, carrier type number 4 is being built. It'll probably be a similar shape to Fujian, but it might have nuclear propulsion if the Chinese can convert their submarine nuclear propulsion to operate in a surface ship environment. That would be interesting to see. So there are a couple of pictures of the Fujian, the beginning of its workout, without aircraft on initially, obviously, trying to work the ship systems first and then get the air wing established afterwards. And then in the top left there, you've got one of the fairly large uncrewed air vehicles that are being operated at the moment. And Trumpeter and a couple of other firms have bought out 1/700 scale models of the new Fujian carrier. The Chinese are getting quite good at producing models of their latest ships, and they like to probably use that as a bit of propaganda, touting the wonders of the Chinese Navy. But it's quite a lovely kit. It was about 70 quid off eBay. You have to go on Chinese eBay to actually find this thing. But it comes with a complete air wing of crewed and uncrewed vehicles. If you go for one of the first editions, you get quite a few extra photo 3D printed aircraft, as well as the normal injection molded aircraft. And it makes a very, very nice display. And you can see here in close up, lots of deck vehicles, as well as the uncrewed aircraft on the left and the crewed aircraft on the right. And you've also got Chinese airborne early warning aircraft with wings that can fold if you wish, along with a few helicopters. And I've added extra personnel as well, because it adds to the scene. And the model even comes with lighting, both for the hangar deck and for the main island, which is quite nice. You can turn that on and off with a little magnet. So quite a nice model. But China has other aircraft carriers besides the 3 that are now at sea. Deep in the Chinese interior, you can see the rest of their carriers. They tend to wander around the desert. One of the most famous ones is a full-sized mock-up of a US carrier deck, which travels along a railway in the Chinese desert and acts as a target for anti-ship ballistic missiles to aim at, which is quite fascinating. There's some static models in the desert as well for targeting. And the Chinese are so impressed with their railway-mounted full-size carrier model that they advertise it at trade fairs using a little tiny model of their full-size model, which is a nice touch. That's the story of the Chinese aircraft carriers to date, but there was a prequel. Liaoning was not the first Chinese aircraft carrier experience. Back in the 1980s, a scrapyard bought the obsolete HMAS Melbourne, which was one of the light Colossus class carriers that the UK constructed. HMAS Melbourne was past its sell-by date. The Australians stripped out some equipment. The rudders were welded solid so that it couldn't be used as a carrier, and it was sold as scrap to China. And China said they'd taken it apart and just used it for scrap. But in actual fact, the whole of the upper deck and some of the systems associated with that have been stripped away from the carrier, taken inland and used as a fully operational land-based training aid for the People's Liberation Army Navy to build up their thoughts about how they would operate carriers once they finally got one at sea, which is quite a clever way to develop capability. And the facility was only fully scrapped in the 2000s. And that is the end of the short but rather impressive story of Chinese aircraft carriers.